Next, we're going to move to our panel discussion, and for this afternoon, I'm delighted that James Maloney from from Canada, an MP for the Canadian government, is going to chair our panel. So we'll invite James to the stage now, and with James, we will have Padraig Rice. Padraig's going to join us as well. Padraig is Deputy Padraig Rice, I should say, from Ballyhan and Cork, my home constituency. And also Ryan O'Mara, also Deputy Ryan O'Mara, TD from Tipperary North and Northwest Kilkenny, is going to join us, and indeed Pat Stafford. Pat is the Director of Engineering at Stafford Crane Group, which is an Irish-American company based in Arizona, so a very successful Irish company. So please, gentlemen, join us on the stage.
Listen, first of all, I just want to say, Leonard, and to the members of the Foundation, thank you so much for inviting me and allowing me to be part of this. It's incredibly special for me. I mean, just standing outside here, as I've said many times to you today and others, I feel like I'm standing in the middle of a painting. It is so beautiful here, and the tour you gave us this morning was extraordinary. Two other things, though. I'm really glad you invited me because this youth theme makes me feel a lot better, I have to tell you. So does the concept of getting promoted. I'm really looking. So I know this is being recorded. If you could, broadcast this in Canada, in Ottawa in particular, I would be, eternally grateful. I don't want to ruin your streak in any way. Minister, I don't know if the minister's still here. I just want to say thank you to him. The concept of becoming the fifth province resonates with me, and I'm happy to be an advocate for that. The only problem is Canadians are a little sensitive about people from other countries trying to say we should become the next province or state right now. So I might put that on hold if you don't mind. Anyway, just a couple of other observations before we get going. Look, the connections between Canada and Ireland are long-standing, they're emotional, economic, etc. It's hard to put into words sometimes. Jane, your talk yesterday, what does it mean to be Irish? What does it mean to be Irish and abroad? It's a question I've been trying to answer for some time in Canada. Another thing I want to thank you for, and the Government of Ireland for, is unleashing John Concannon on Canada. You want to talk about a tenacious charm offensive, throw in a high degree of creativity, and that's what you've got with Ambassador John Concannon. The man has been in Canada for less than a year, and he has already left his mark, and he's left no stone unturned, and I just want to say thank you to him, and thank you for all of you. We're very lucky to have you in Canada. Very grateful for that. The minister also talked about, the Irish work ethic and the sweat here, building Ireland, but building the United States. I do have to add they helped build Canada too. So there you go. That's my last observation. But so listen, I'm glad to be here with the three of you, and we do have some interesting things to talk about. The other thing I should say right at the beginning, for the last day and the beginning of this session, we've talked about the power and the negative influence of cell phones and social media. I should tell everybody, take their phones, put them outside there. You can't look at them or record anything over here, but I'll leave that one alone. But the three of you, I've read all of your bios. I'm very impressed and flattered to be up here on the stage with you, as we did yesterday. Rather than me try to embarrass myself and tell the audience about you, I thought I'd just turn it over to you individually and do that and just share your background a bit before we get going. So I'll start with you, Padraig.
Yeah, so my name is Padraig Rice. I'm a Social Democrats TD representing Cork South Central.
My name is Ryan O'Mara. I'm a first-time TD for North Tipperary and Northwest Kilkenny, and I represent the Fianna Fáil party.
My name is Patrick Stafford. I am the Director of Sales and Engineering at Stafford Tower Cranes. We are a worldwide manufacturer and distributor of tower cranes.
Fantastic, thank you. The one thing I didn't like about any of your bios was your birth date, because I remember when I was in university when these guys were born. But listen, I'm really glad to be here with you guys, and I do have some questions. So Padraig, I'm going to start with you. The emphasis of this event is youth. It's something as politicians we're all struggling with, and engaging youth, and you've come to this with a youthful perspective. So you've just been elected in this most recent election, I understand. Your party leader, Holly, is incredibly young herself. Your party has a lot of young people in it. So I'm wondering if you could tell us your thoughts on how you view the world, or the political world, in terms of trying to attract young people and get them engaged in politics, and whether you think that young people look at politics as an opportunity to make change.
Yeah, absolutely. And first off, I'd just like to thank Leonard and the team for a fantastic event. It's been really engaging and really great to be here in Valentia. I think we're part of an interesting generation. I was born in 1990, and people in my generation, we were children during the Celtic Tiger era. I turned 18 in 2008 as the economy crashed. And I think that had a huge impact on people my age. We witnessed huge levels of immigration, job losses, rise in student fees, cuts in student grants, and I think it politicized a whole group of people who are now engaged in politics, because we saw firsthand the decisions that were being made by politicians were having on our lives and our families and our whole society, and many of us made the determination that we wanted to get involved in politics and we wanted to see things done differently, and we wanted to change the world around us. I was elected to UC Students' Union as a student leader, and we organised the biggest student protest in the history of the Irish state. We had over 40,000 students come on the streets of Dublin in 2010 to protest against the government policies about the cuts to education and about the rise in emigration. So we had a whole group of people who were really engaged in politics. And then I think following on from that, we had the two social referendums. We had the referendum on marriage equality in 2015 and the abortion rights referendum in 2018. And those referendums really energised young people. Young people could see firsthand the impact they could have, and they could change Ireland for the better. On college campuses around the country, we had thousands of students registered to vote, with people queuing up in order to get on the voter register drive, students coming out, canvassing, engaging, putting up posters, and put huge energy behind both of those referendums. And as I say, that they saw firsthand the real impact that they could have on the country and the direction of the country. My own party, the Social Democrats, was founded just after the marriage equality referendum. So we're 10 years old. We have our birthday this weekend. We're having a party in Dublin to celebrate our 10 years, but lots of young people got involved in the party as a result after that. So if you come to one of our branch meetings, most people will be under 40, majority women, and people who want to see change in Ireland and want to see a different direction and a different approach. But I think to be fair to the other parties as well, we do see a lot of younger people engaging in politics. In the local elections held last year, there was over 200 young people across the country ran in those elections. I ran for the first time, and I became the youngest member of Cork City Council. And when I got elected to the Dáil, I got replaced. My co-optee was Niamh O'Connor, and she's now the youngest member of Cork City Council. But there are young people on our local authorities and in the Oireachtas across the board. But if you look at Ireland and compare it to other countries, we're doing quite well in terms of civic engagement. So there was a study done last year, and we're ranked 18th out of 140 countries in terms of youth engagement in politics and civil society. So we're doing quite well, and I think things like those movements and pretty issues-based campaigning, young people have got involved in, and it's really great to see. And I think we need to see more people in young people in politics, and more diversity. Like, I think city councils and county councils and the Oireachtas should look like Ireland. Unfortunately, they don't at the moment. So we need to see more women. We need to see more younger people. We need to see more travellers, people from ethnic minorities, New Irish. We need to see that greater level of diversity in politics.
Yeah, thank you. So would you say the trend line is up or down?
I think it's going up. I think
good.
I think there's been quite strong youth movements of late, and I think, and it's not just the traditional politics. Like, it's involved in campaigns, in activism, in volunteering, in civil society groups. Like, young people often will engage more based on the issues that they really care about, whether it's like climate or disability rights, and we'll get involved in those issues where they want to see change. And I think we've got good engagement from young people across the board on that. And we need to just encourage people and provide those opportunities for them to stay engaged in politics.
I'll talk to you after we're done, but I want to know where Canada fell on that study. Okay, so Pat, I'm going to move over to you now. So my first question is, why isn't an Irish-Canadian business coming after the Stafford Crane Group? I am intrigued and want to know why you've sort of moved the company or started your business in the United States. But by the way, congratulations. I understand you just got married. Is that right?
Yes, that's
Mackenzie's
correct,
your
yeah.
wife. Well done, yeah. Now, you're an executive with a successful Irish company. You've moved to the States, and you're successful there as well. I'm hesitating because the question is, can you comment on how politics and business interact with each other in the United States? This question might have been written a few months ago, I think. Anyway, what are your views on this? I'm curious to know how you feel about politics and business in the United States, and not just in the small window we're looking at right now, but from the time your group moved to the United States and looking forward.
Sure. So, no matter where you are in the world, politics and business will always have a strong interaction, but right now the political climate in the United States is kind of shaping a climate of extreme uncertainty. So for companies like ours, where we have a manufacturing base in the EU and we send a lot of our products all over the world, but primarily to the United States at this time, the constant back and forth in economic policy with the tariffs is creating extreme uncertainty for us. Like, we don't know if we invest to manufacture our products in the United States, is that going to play out in the long term, or 2 weeks later, is it going to be a completely different situation? So that's the main, effect on our company. More in general, we're seeing from our clients in the United States, which are mainly large construction firms, are having a really difficult time pricing their projects because they're dealing with vendors that provide materials from all over the world. So, for us, we're just importing stuff from the EU, products from the EU, whereas you may have a company that's getting their products from Canada, Mexico, China maybe, and they will probably be dealing with even greater economic uncertainty than us. And then beyond that, it's become almost taboo to discuss politics in the United States in a business setting, whether that be with clients or internally. And I think that's something that can continue to drive political polarization, and it's also very important to be able to openly discuss issues in the workplace and not feel, like you're going to get into a shouting match with your coworker or with a client. It's not a good space to be in.
So, leaving aside the tariffs and whatnot, do you find people know you're an Irish-based company, you're originally from Ireland. So do you find with your customers now in recent times that there's do you feel the tension at all? Is there any difference in the last few months than there was a year ago?
I wouldn't say so, to be honest. The Irish diaspora in America is quite well loved, I'd say. And, my father and my uncle are, the ones that are actually from Ireland. I'm from the States myself, but, sometimes they can maybe get some business because we are Irish, to be honest. Like, the diaspora is very well loved in America, I'd say. And I don't see that changing.
Well, that's another thing. The Irish are loved everywhere. It's the same in Canada. Yeah. So you wouldn't be a false subject to any of those problems, I don't think. Okay, Ryan, I'm going to move over to you. I was talking about this issue at lunch with some of the people here about the high levels of education. Mm-hmm. The percentage, in fact, it was higher than I thought. I thought about 56% of the people in Ireland had sort of third level education. It turns out it's closer to 70%, which gives Ireland I would think, a huge economic leg up when you're dealing with other countries, but from a competitive standpoint and whatnot, do you think that continues? First of all, do you think it is something that gives Ireland an advantage over other countries, in the European Union or any other country for that matter?
Yeah, I guess, first of all, FDI has been transformative to our economy, primarily down to the level of education that we have, the system of education and the high standards that we attempt to achieve in this country. There are other topics, obviously, that feed in there. There's been a lot of discussion around tax rates, corporation tax rates. That plays a factor, and the fact that we're an English-speaking country within the European Union. But I don't think those two in and of themselves would have been possible without the level of education that we achieve in this country. And it has been transformative, particularly since entering the European Union, but even in more recent years for what it has done for our economy, the FDI side of things in particular. But in the 23 to 34 age bracket, we're looking at third level qualifications at undergraduate level of about 63% compared with the EU target of 45%, which is quite incredible. In the 20 to 29 age group, we're seeing the highest level of STEM graduates in the European Union, and we also have the youngest workforce within the European Union. So things are good right now. They have been good for some time in the area of tertiary education. We also saw in 2020 the Department of Further and Higher Education, Research, Innovation and Science was founded separate from the Department of Education, which was a key point in the Fianna Fáil manifesto and that general election, and a very strong point of Micheál Martin's to drive research and innovation, to drive our third level education sector. Because while it's very good right now, of course there are challenges, but it is good and the numbers are clearly good. The level of employment we have, the level of FDI in the country, the level of taxation coming out of well-paying jobs as a result of tertiary education. While it's good right now, we need to look at where we're going to go with it as well. Research and innovation, I think, will be key to that, particularly the EU as a whole trying to catch up or bridge the gap between either the US and China. I think particularly what's going on in the US at the moment in the administration there, their focus on research and innovation, or the lack of funding that is potentially coming through. There is a space for the EU, but we haven't been brilliant at it. There is a market there. I think that the work of the Department of Further and Higher Education will be absolutely crucial to the future of education in this country. The development that we are seeing of tertiary education, I think, is very, very important, that we're trying to work less in silos with further education on one side, higher education on the other, trying to link them and give as many positive pathways as possible to students coming out of education, so that those who might not attain their points at their leaving cert aren't pigeonholed into not being able to get the course they want, but rather they can work up through a long course by course, step by step. And I think the work within the Department of Education or Higher Education will be very, very important in that regard. And finally, I guess, because we are seeing so many people now being educated at third level, I think the understanding of the utility of education in Ireland has changed dramatically from a generation or 2 generations ago to what it is now, that we see research showing that those with an undergraduate degree, just an undergraduate degree, can earn up to 80% more than those without one, that the utility of understanding within families of the utility of education has dramatically changed. I would even possibly give my own example in that sense, that my 2 parents both did as far as the group cert, I think it was called back then. They went out and worked then. I'm the youngest of 5. My older brothers are quite a bit older than me in the sense that when they were leaving secondary school, they were able to go straight into trades at that point in time. But by the time I was going through, the continuance of education from second level to third level was really, really important. And I think now that that has worked through so many families, there is the potential for each individual family unit or each part of society to understand the utility of education, which wouldn't have been there when the tradition wasn't there. So yes, I think third level education has been vital to the economic success story of this nation, but it's what it is going to be in the future as well. Because it is good right now, we need to face up to the challenges. That's why there's a separate department there, particularly in the area of funding. But what can we do in the years to come, particularly in the research and innovation field, I think will be key to our future success.
So how do you tap into that abroad? I was having a conversation last night. I asked how Intel ended up in Ireland. They said one of the reasons was they were looking to set up in Europe, and they thought, well, they're going to be hiring a lot of the engineers from Ireland anyway, so why not just set up in Ireland? So the high level of education has got to be a massive marketing tool for the Irish government or Ireland to draw businesses in. Does the government actively engage and sort of use that as a talking point?
Yeah, I think it's the education. For a long time was the corporation tax rates and also the English-speaking nation on the edge of Europe. They were the 3 key points. I guess going forward as well, we have to look at how our education sector is talking to or engaging with industry as well. And I think that will be key for what future job growth looks like, but also what future jobs are as well. We're very much a knowledge and skill-based economy at the moment, but with the advancements in AI, for example, how will our education sector and future jobs, how will they interact then? And I think interactions with companies like that, but others coming to Ireland as well as those here at the moment, will inform that thinking as well.
Okay, so I've got another political question, and then I'm going to get back to some more general questions about social media. But so, look, I come from Canada, and by the way, the other thing we have in common is we both have an Irish Prime Minister. They both have Irish passports, which is why we're both doing so well now. But something else we have in common is Ireland has been dominated politically by 2 parties for 100 plus years now. So has Canada. But what's changed here is, and I've been witnessing this, the 2 main parties have, they formed a coalition after after the most recent election, but the one before that. Now they did it again. My impression is it was done out of necessity, but after a certain amount of time, it sort of starts to take root. So my question is, how do the 2 of you view that? Because you're a 10-year-old party now. I mean, you have multiple parties, whereas before it's just the 2 parties. And I see no world in Canada where the 2 main parties would ever get together and do this. Because our parties are they're both dominant, but right now they're just so polar opposite, I could never see it happening. So how do you see the landscape currently, and how do you see the landscape going forward? And how do you think young people view the working together, the two parties, and how the party system's shaping up into the future?
So I think that the change in the political landscape is good. I think having more political parties, more representation, more opportunities to vote for a variety of political points is good. My own party, we have doubled our Oireachtas members at every election. We started with 3 TDs, we went to 6, we now have 12 Oireachtas members. So we're continuing to grow, and we hope to continue to grow, and hope to be a party that could be one day part of the government. And I think what we're trying to do is provide an alternative space with alternative viewpoints that are different to maybe some of those set out previously by the minister. And I might be one of those people who in the Oireachtas maybe gives out to him about some of the issues, because I think there are many issues in the country. And one of the minister was saying about comparing Ireland to 100 years ago, I think what we need to do is compare Ireland to other European countries. And if we do that, we're behind on many fronts. Like, we now have 15,000 people in this country who are homeless. It is a shocking state of affairs that people can't get a house of their own. Young people can't afford to buy a house. Rents are at record high, and house prices are continuing to rise. So there's real struggles for people. If you look at our health services, the minister mentioned breast cancer. People who have symptomatic breast cancer, when they're seen by the GP, they should get an urgent referral to a breast disease clinic within 10 days. A lot of people aren't doing that. I've spoken to women in Dublin who are waiting 2 months, who have symptoms before they're seen at a breast disease clinic. And one of the hospitals in Dublin, more than 50% of the patients are going beyond the 10 days and often into months waiting to be seen in our health service. So there are really serious challenges. Similarly, in terms of disabilities, every day we get calls to our office of young children with autism who can't get school places, and people struggle to get access to basic services. Women who can't go back to work because they can't find childcare, which is having a big impact on our economy, because we're losing really talented people who simply can't return to work because the childcare services aren't there, because of the model of childcare and the public policy decisions to have the kind of privatised childcare system that we have. So there are lots of things that I would like to see changed, and I think the rise in centre-left and progressive politics is good, because we are trying to challenge many of these things and create change on many of these fronts to create a fairer, more equal Ireland that has a thriving economy at the heart of it, but has universal public services and a good quality of life for people right across the country. And I think also in places like this, we need to ensure that, like, our rural communities are thriving. I grew up not too far away from here. When I'm a TD for Cork, I grew up on the Dingle Peninsula, the next peninsula over, in a small village called Camp, ironically. But we need to ensure that we have a doctor in every village, that we have a school in every village, that we have public transport where we have at least a connection every hour in every village, and that people in these areas can live here. And I think that's why the rise in remote working is good, that people can get employment, good quality jobs, and live in rural communities if they can get planning, if they can get a house and create a family and stay in these areas. So I think there's lots to change, and I think Ireland is a great country, and we've done phenomenally well in recent decades, but there's a lot to do. So I'm very hopeful that we will see a rise in centre-left politics and hopefully have a government that's led by the centre-left not too far in the future, and that we can change many of these things, because there are real challenges in this country that need to be addressed.
Okay, so Ryan, before I give you the rebuttal, maybe Pat, I'll give you sort of if you want to take a shot at this question as an outsider looking in, but somebody with, who's part of the Irish community, what are your thoughts? Because it's a real landscape change in the last six years.
Yeah, absolutely. Some things that I think that the Irish government could perhaps focus on is just encourage government investment in housing and infrastructure, continue to do so. There are some cities in the U.S. that do this well, such as New York City, Seattle, Boston. They have some framework that might be useful. And another thing I would say is just to continue Ireland's leadership in the growth of renewable energy. I think that it's a real beacon of hope for the climate, and that they can continue to do that.
Yeah, Ryan, Ireland's definitely a leader in that front. So, Ryan, what are your thoughts on this? As one of those two parties.
It's a much more fragmented political system now than it was back in the days when Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael were in constant opposition to each other, for sure. But I think first and foremost, when you look around the world at the moment, East and West in particular, the healthy state of our political system is something that I think we should be very proud of. Our voting system, the PRSTV, allows for an incredibly proportionate and representative style of democracy in this country, which I also think is a very good thing, so that every vote is counted as much as possible, and that's why we're seeing so many parties today. But I suppose once an election takes place, the job of Dáil Éireann then is to elect a government. And a government has to be based on a programme for government where parties that have enough in common policy-wise or based on their manifestos policy-wise can come together and form what I think is really, really important above all else is a stable government. We've seen fairly stable governments in this country now, I guess since 2011, as in long-running governments with the exception of confidence and supply between 16 and 20 in the sense that we didn't know when an election was going to be called, but to face the challenges that are there, to have certainty, particularly in terms of the economy, to see investment coming into the country and being able to invest in those key services like housing, healthcare, disability services, and so much more. We need a stable government, and that's what this one has allowed for. I would think as a first-time TD and a TD who came into politics after the days of the 2.5 party system that I have a really, really important responsibility that when I go into Dáil Éireann that the government is stable. I think that is really important, that if we have anything else, that we're seeing elections every 18 months like we did in the 1980s or every 2 to 3 years, a lot less will get done. So for me, that was my priority. When you go into a coalition government, you're never going to agree with on every point with the people you go in with, whether it's parties on the left or parties on the left coming together with parties in the centre or on the right. You simply can't do that. You have to form a programme for government, which I suppose in politics, the art of politics being compromise, you try and get as much of yours in there, the others try and get as much of theirs in there, and you come to a middle ground to make the progress we need to make. Obviously, housing being one of the key ones, healthcare, crime, antisocial behaviour, particularly in rural Ireland from my point of view, and disability services being key from the general election in particular. So the programme from government guides that. It then becomes the job of backbenchers, first-time TDs like myself, to try and hold the government to account on that programme for government as well. But for me, I think the most important thing after an election is electing government through the Dáil that will be stable and will last and run the course.
Very helpful. I mean, like, notwithstanding what I said, I always find that the most productive work in politics gets done when the cameras are off, when you're dealing with your colleagues one-on-one behind the scenes. And I'm going to move into the subject of social media right now, which is where the problem begins, in my opinion. Because if you watch our House of Commons, it's much more toxic than what I've seen in the Dáil. I was there on Wednesday. I've been there a couple of times, and it's much more civilized, your question period, than in ours. The ambassador's been to ours. It's all gotcha stuff. First of all, our question and answers are only about 45 seconds, so you don't have time to ask a substantive question, and you certainly don't have time to give us a substantive answer, whereas you do, and it's a much better system in my opinion. So, notwithstanding that, one of the themes for the last day and a half has been negativity, social media, its impact in politics, but in business as well. I mean, it's become, look, it's a tool of the trade for what we do. We have to I'm going to be posting about being at this wonderful conference, so my constituents know what I'm doing and telling them the great value in this, as I'm sure you are too. But the unfortunate thing is, I go on social media, I can put a post up saying, Merry Christmas, standing in front of a Christmas tree, and some of the comments are going to be, I hope you lose the next election, I hope you go away, and it's getting progressively worse. The bigger problem, in my opinion, though, is, and this is what the minister was talking about, we talked about yesterday, but it's the algorithm problem. I mean, it's the negativity, and people only, and with the decline of print media and regular media and the increase in social media, people are getting their information from social media, and it's driving this negative behavior. So how do we as politicians, and you're much younger than I am, all three of you are younger than I am. How do we deal with this? Like, what do we have to do to change people's views? Because the thing that puzzles me is everybody gets the problem. Everybody knows the problem exists, except it keeps getting worse. So what can we do?
Absolutely. I think we need to see regulation. I think we live in a very interesting time. Like, the internet is very new in terms of the long span of human history, and we live in an interesting time where many of us remember a time before the internet and a time afterwards. But we absolutely need to regulate it, and I think that's fundamental. And I think that's the point that. And I get frustrated when I hear government ministers give out about the problem, but not actually put forward the solutions and actually begin to see some regulation. And I think that there's a good comparison. If you think back first when we introduced cars, like, we didn't have roundabouts, we didn't have lines on the road, you didn't have to do your driver theory test, you didn't have to pass the test, you didn't have policemen, you didn't have all of the things we have now to prevent car crashes. So we put all of those regulations and rules in place so that we could all drive safely on the roads, and we put in speed limits and all of those things, and we continue to update them. We need to do that for the internet and for social media. We need to see robust regulation. We need to start treating social media companies like advertisers, like advertising companies, which is what they are. They are selling ads, and we need to regulate them. We also need to have a really frank and honest discussion about the algorithms and the damage it's doing. I heard a former vice president of one of the big social media companies say they no longer understand how the algorithm works, like they have lost control of the algorithm. So I think we need to think seriously about turning off some of the algorithms. Like if you think back of the early days of Facebook, you logged on, you scrolled through a genuine timeline, and it was comments, it was updates from your friends, your family, and you scrolled through and you just saw a genuine timeline of what people were doing in your life, and you might have seen the odd ad, and you scrolled on through. You weren't being fed things based on your interactions on other websites, or they weren't amplifying hate messages and targeting you in the way that happens now. And I think we have to say, in particular, the hateful comments, like these companies are profiting off hate and hateful content, and people are being targeted, and it's doing huge damage to our society and to our politics. It's having a corrosive effect on people's mental health and well-being, and we need a really robust engagement with it, and we need to see ministers do more than give out about the problem, actually put forward some of the solutions, take on some of these tech giants, and actually regulate the internet for the good of all of us.
Anything to add?
I would agree with an awful lot of what you're after saying now. I guess, first of all, I've done quite a bit of work within the Fianna Fáil Parliamentary Party on this, because we set up a working group particularly on online safety, particularly for children, but not exclusively. But I think a big part of the problem with a country the size of Ireland, and although yes, a lot of the companies are based here, is the size of these companies, that we need to look more to a European context, which would be slow as well. But particularly, I suppose, the safety for children online, the impact it is having on them mentally, but also in terms of brain rot, how much time they're spending on social media, how it's impacting on their ability to interact socially. That is a massive, massive challenge coming up the line for our society. I already see it myself since I went into full-time politics at this level. The amount of pressure I feel on my phone now because of emails, social media, trying to keep on top of everything, has changed the way I actually interact with people sometimes. But there has been a lot of talk by some politicians in the country around social media, and there is some talk, and I know Australia has done it, for example, or is trying to do it around a phone ban, social media ban for under 16s. I think it is a very easy line to come out with that I think would have very little positive results for young people in the country, particularly when you look at algorithms, like Padraig said, and the danger that they do, particularly, I suppose, to young men on the toxic masculinity side, and young women then in terms of body image, are two that I will come across a lot from talking to young people. But the likes of YouTube are exempt from the ban in Australia. Like, that's just completely unworkable. It might be something good for a politician to come out and say, to sound like they are doing the right thing or doing something, but it is far, far more complex than that, and a huge amount of the onus has to be put back on top of the social media companies. Work I've done recently is questioning whether it's the individual social media companies that you go to, why they have to enforce their own rules, but how would we get to a stage where we know what age a person is online? We also need to get to a stage where we know the person posting online is actually the person behind the phone as well. But what checks are there, whether it's through app stores, where at the point of download you're able to verify the age of the individual, to know the type of consent, or to have the consent to know the type of content they should then see in the social media profiles. It is incredibly complex, but it is an area I think we can't shy away from any longer in this country. I've interacted with some youth groups, youth representative groups, and I've more to come later in the summer, because I don't think young people should be excluded from the conversation either. And I think actually if you brought in a social media or a smartphone ban for under 16s, you would exclude parents and young people at the same time, because it's very easy just to go out and say you shouldn't do something, when in fact they will go and do exactly just that then. So we're trying to bring interactions in from parents by doing an online survey at the moment on the digital age, or the Parenting in the Digital Age survey, but also interacting with young people to find out how they feel about being online, what pressures they feel, and how we can help them, because I think an outright ban won't work. It won't prepare them for the positive side of technology and social media either, once they reach the age of 16. But from, I guess, the other side of it then, negativity online, I have seen a remarkable increase since going into Dáil Éireann. I can't say it's the worst. I'm definitely not getting the worst of everyone out there, but there is a remarkable increase. I'd love to know in the last 6 months how I've got so corrupt when I've been far too busy to be corrupt. But that is That is the line that I get thrown at me no matter what I put up. We ran a campaign or a launch recently in Leinster House for community cafes or community tea rooms. There are 27 across the country in 10 counties, but they're extremely important for rural regeneration in our towns and villages that no longer have the pub, the shop, the post office or anything else. It's a social outlet for people to go to. And one of the comments immediately under from someone I actually know that wouldn't even say it to me in person was around, well, what are you doing for housing? But like, what I've spoken about more than anything else in the Dáil is on housing, but I happen to do a video on something else. But the challenge with it is, and Minister Healy-Rae was very good on it, the challenge with social media is now a lot of the time, people will comment something under your post, not anonymously, but something they would never say to you in person, particularly as a politician. And it is such a strange place to have ended up in at 29 years of age, when I didn't have that interaction before I had the letters TD after my name, that people automatically thought, not in person, but online, they could treat you differently. And there is a lot of personal reflection needed in that, outside of government doing something as well, and where society eventually stands up to it as well. Now, I'm not giving the poor me around politicians either, but it is a side that when the minister was talking there earlier, I could really, really see, and I know he's gone through it for a lot of years longer than I have, but what is the societal responsibility in that side of it, outside of our responsibility as legislators, particularly to protect younger people?
It's a big problem. I'm going to get to whether the impact of social media on business in a second too, but I just want to say this. I had no less than 3 female colleagues who decided not to run again in our recent election, and it was because they were just tired of the relentless abuse. That's what it was. It was abuse. And it came in person, but it mostly came online. But I find the online component gives people license to say things to your face that they never would have said 10 years ago or 20 years ago too. And it's just, we have a collective obligation. This is I can get on a bit of a soapbox here, because we had comprehensive legislation last year on online hate and online harms, and it didn't get through for 3 reasons. One, the opposition filibustered Parliament for about 3 months because and the tech companies, they've got unlimited resources, and they push back on this stuff, and then we had an election, so the legislation died. But people start, well, you're limiting freedom of speech. We're not doing that at all. In fact, it's the exact opposite is what we're doing. We're trying to ensure freedom of speech continues to exist and thrive. Okay, end of rant. Yeah.
One of my key frustrations with the government is they'll constantly say on this is, we have to wait for at a European level to do this regulation. But we have, somebody has to lead that. A European country has to take the lead in that. Yeah. And we are at the headquarters for most of the European headquarters for all of these big social media companies. So the obligation should be on the Irish government to lead this discussion at a European level. And we should put it up to other European countries. And if it has to happen at a European level or a global level, Ireland should take a leading role, because we have housed these companies here and we've taken their taxes, and we should take that. And I would agree with you that I think women and minority groups are targeted the most. Yeah. Before my current job, I used to work in human rights, and I worked for an LGBT organisation. And if you post on X on anything to do with gay or lesbian or trans issues, you will get hundreds of hate comments targeted at you. So there are minority groups who are being silenced because of online hate, and it really needs to change. Yeah, no, it's terrible. So what about, the change in social media, the change in sort of the tone and whatnot? Does it have an impact on your business in any way? Or do you use social media as a form of marketing? And has that changed?
Yeah, of course, yeah. Social media is a great marketing tool for business. It's a great way to reach a really wide audience. And to some extent, I believe that social media platforms, business ones especially, like LinkedIn, have to some extent actually escaped the toxicity so far. You'll still see some of it, but here and there. But on a more individual level, I would say people just need to find a way to get outside of their echo chamber. As we discussed yesterday, the algorithm feeds you what you want to hear. So I think a good way to do that, I'm going to plug an account real quick. I have no connection to it. It's called Ground News. Basically it reports a story. It shows you how much of that story is being reported by left-leaning outlets and right-leaning outlets and a center. So it'll show you if this story is a blind spot for the right or the left. And I think, short of staying off of social media completely, I think finding a way to get out of those echo chambers and find accounts like that are very unbiased and neutral, I think is the best way to escape the toxicity.
Is that an app that you can add to your phone?
It's an Instagram account. Yeah, it's called Ground News. Yeah, I would recommend to everybody.
Sounds very useful. Okay, we're running out of time, so maybe last question. What do you see Ireland looking like in 2040, and what would you like it to look like in 2040?
My vision is that we have a republic of equals, where we have more equality, we have more fairness in society, that we have better universal public services that everybody across the country can depend on, in particular universal healthcare. I'd like to see us implement Sláinte Care and deliver really good quality public services for people across the country, and we need to get there by 2040. I also would like to see us have less reliance on multinational companies and grow our domestic economy, grow indigenous companies. Earlier today we went to the Portmagee Whiskey Company, a local small business. I'd like to see business like that being able to thrive, to grow, to create sustainable local jobs so that people can live in rural Ireland in small communities and can have decent jobs, can have access to good quality housing, can get a good education for their kids, and can live the best life they want to live. And I think, crucially, I'd like to see Ireland take more leadership in terms of climate action, because we are running out of time in terms of saving our environment and climate, and we need to take more action there before 2040.
For me, I think balanced regional development will be extremely important. Okay, we have our housing, healthcare, disability issues, which are national ones, but in terms of how we're going to advance our economy and the different regions of this country between now and 2040, I think balanced regional development will be extremely important, particularly for the regeneration of rural Ireland, in particular those rural towns and villages, many of which I represent, and bringing life back into them, keeping the local schools open or the local GA or soccer club being able to field their teams, and maintaining that sense of community that is so important, and that sense of belonging within your own space, and not having to travel to our major cities, or particularly our capital city, for the type of employment that some people currently have to. And just on Padraig's point there, particularly in relation to Indigenous business, absolutely it's very important, because we have seen windfall taxes and we've seen a huge amount of money come into this country, and particularly in recent years on the corporation side of it. But going forward, we don't know what's going to happen in terms of challenges, particularly from the US in relation to that, from onshoring and reshoring of a lot of businesses. It's not fully reliable for years to come, whereas our Indigenous sector is so important. The Enterprise Ireland annual report for 2024 was published this week, and there were 6,200 new jobs created by Enterprise Ireland backed companies in 2024. 66% of them were outside of the Dublin region. So I think that has to be a key part of the focus for what this country is going to be like in terms of being balanced, possibly even physically balanced, with all of the weight not being on the East Coast, and the potential that we would see, obviously, in the likes of Cork, Limerick, Galway, but very importantly as well, North Tipperary and Northwest Kilkenny.
As I said earlier, I think in 2040 Ireland can continue to lead in sustainable energy, reaching net zero internationally. I believe more investment in public transportation and infrastructure is needed. A train from Dublin to the airport would be really nice. Continue to speak out against injustice, against marginalized people. I believe that Ireland, for such a small nation, has a really, really strong voice. And then lastly, I'd say as a tech hub for Europe, it could just be a leader in AI ethics and regulation.
I flew in on Tuesday morning with my wife Deirdre, who's sitting right there. She said, "I can't believe they still don't have a train from the airport to downtown." So that's a good place to end. But I'll just say this: look, as a Canadian politician, as somebody who's proud of their Irish heritage, look, Ireland is a role model to the world, and my colleagues are sick and tired of me saying, "Yes, I know Ireland does this, and I know Ireland does that," because you do it so well. And I would say the future is in great hands with the people like the three of you. So thanks very much for letting me be part of it.